Hey everybody, welcome to another Lunloop AMA. This is an Ask Me Anything format where Lunloop subscribers can ask me anything about markets, trading, or life. Today's video stems from a daily update I did earlier in the week called Nailed It. And in this daily update, I did somewhat of a victory lap, looking back contemporaneously at how we analyzed the first quarter of this year, and more specifically, the last 7 to 10 trading days. So just for context, that's the first quarter, but this is what we're really focusing on here. Specifically, this move right here, which we can just going forward call the decision. All right, so after I posted this video, I got some questions in the Lunloop trading room. And I love that. I love that we can have this open, honest, respectful back and forth in the Lunloop community. This is what being part of a community is all about. So this video is my attempt to answer some of those questions. And spoiler alert, I'm going to weigh in on this president and how I feel about his process or lack of process and actions. All right, having said that, I'm going to try to cover a lot of stuff here. And I want to do it as coherently as possible. So this video may have some sketchy edits, some smash cuts, even some outfit changes, but it's all done in the sense of trying to get the most information across in the most efficient way in the least amount of time. There's three main themes. I'm going to hit some other themes, but there's three main themes that were proposed in the trading room. The first theme was, well, wasn't that decision or that move on the 8th, wasn't that just a 50-50 coin flip, a binary event? And if so, the implication is, well, how could you have traded it? The second one was, well, isn't this just outcome bias? Aren't we just looking back in retrospect and saying, oh, of course it worked out based upon the result? And the third is related to, I guess for lack of I'm trying to frame this correctly. It's like, well, couldn't it have just gone the other way? Couldn't that decision, the decision to not invade Iran right now or not bomb Iran right now, couldn't have gone the other way based upon our president and the way he can just switch his mind in a second? So those are the three main questions I'm going to try to address here. But like I said, I'm going to address some other ones as well. So first, let's level set. In this video, I'm just going to present to you the way I approach the markets. And no matter how you approach markets, there has to be some sense of buy-in. You have to say, okay, I'm going to buy in on this methodology, this theory, this idea, because you can't get rid of uncertainty in the market. Uncertainty in the market is not a bug to be fixed. It is table stakes, as I knock over my water bottle. If it wasn't, if you could get rid of uncertainty, everybody would make money. You don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word of Jim Simons, who is probably one of the most brilliant and successful hedge fund managers ever. He's the man who this book, The Man Who Solved the Market, is named after. Simons says, I knew that was going to come up. And you can find this clip very easily. He says, in reference to Renaissance Technology, his hedge fund, he says, we are only right 50.75% of the time. Not even 51%, 50.75% of the time. But, he continues, we are 100% right 50.75% of the time. And by doing that, you can make billions of dollars. So, I'm not trying to convince you that the way I approach the markets is right. I'm not trying to convince you it's the only way. You may disagree with what I say, and that's totally fine. So let's start with that. The second thing is, this is going to be somewhat of a lease versus buy discussion. You know, there's that perpetual argument that people have when it comes to a car. Is it better to lease a car or is it better to buy a car? And there is no definitive answer because there are an infinite amount of variables, not the least of which is the personal preferences of the person that's either buying or leasing the car. And then even if you get all that in the mix, there are things that will happen after the point where you have to choose to buy or lease the car that in retrospect can color the way you view that decision. So we're never going to be like, this is the full answer here. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the concept of technical analysis. This is how I view technical analysis. Okay. The market is driven by two main emotions, fear and greed. Fear of losing money, greed of making more money. Fear and greed manifests itself with buys and sells. Buys, that's a manifestation of greed. That's a bet on higher prices. Sells, that's a manifestation of fear. That is a bet on lower prices. Even the machines that trade markets are programmed by people who have those emotions, fear, greed. Those are universal and they're infinite. They're just as valid 2,000 years ago as they probably will be in 2,000 years from here. So what technical analysis attempts to do is set up a framework in which you can read the footprints of fear and greed. You can pick up the patterns of fear and greed in the market. Not so that you can say, I know exactly what's going to happen, but so you can get an edge, a sense. You can get an idea of the probabilities of one thing happening opposed to something else happening. Okay, so that's technical analysis. Now, technical analysis appears in terms of price. Price is the only objective thing we know about the market. It's the only objective thing we know about stocks. I can look at Apple today and say, Apple is trading at X. That is an objective reality that nobody else can argue with. It's not subject to interpretation. So the question we're really asking here is, what can we learn from price? What can price really tell us? And it comes down to two things. Is price predictive or is price reactive? Now, here's the answer, and you're not going to like it. It's both. Sometimes it is predictive. Sometimes it's reactive. But where we have a problem is in that word predict, okay? Price, technical analysis, it's not designed to predict with certainty the outcome. It's designed to predict the probability of that outcome. And I think that's where people get confused. This is particularly confusing when it comes to the concept of a binary outcome, a yes or no outcome. Think about it this way. Is Leonardo DiCaprio going to win the Academy Award for Best Actor this year? That is a binary outcome. Either yes, he does win, or no, he doesn't win. There is no third option. Okay. But the probabilities of him winning are not binary. Go to Polymarket, go to Kalshi, go to any, predictive or gaming site. Have you ever seen an issue where the probability is exactly 50-50 on a binary outcome? That's just not the case. Okay, so let's translate this into a market scenario. And I want to start with a thought experiment just to illustrate a point. Let's imagine that you were a trader locked in an underground cavern, and all you got was food, water, and a data feed that displayed charts here. That's the only information that you had to decide whether you were going to go long or short or be out of the market. When you saw this big candle right here, that would have gotten your attention. Remember, you don't have any insight or any influences or any news. You have nothing except data. This would have gotten your attention. And when you saw that we confirmed this big candle here, when you saw buyers step in and push us back to this level, when you saw consolidation like this here, and even on this day, you would have said, I'm getting long. It wouldn't have even been a question. You would have said, I'm getting long from a technical standpoint. Everything here screamed, get long from a technical standpoint, and you would put your stop in here maybe, or down here, or maybe down here, depending on how aggressive you were. Okay, so let's update our thought experiment. Let's say it's 1910, and you live in a rural farm in Oklahoma, and somehow magically you're able to get real-time quotes and display charts, but it takes 2 months for news to get to you. 2 months for the newspaper to get to, what did I say, Oklahoma or Ohio? Oklahoma. So again, there's no way you wouldn't have gotten long on this technical setup. And what would have happened is 2 months later, you would have gotten the newspaper from New York City, and you would have found out that on this day, President Taft proposed a bill that would expand the railroads dramatically. And on this day, you would have found out that the leader of the opposition said, I agree with President Taft, let's pass this bill. The point I'm making here is that from a purely technical standpoint, there is no question about getting long here. Okay? No question. Assuming you want to take that risk. Okay? There is nothing wrong technically with this setup here. It is a solid technical setup. The problem is we're not in an environment where there's no news. We're not even in an environment where there is delayed news. We're in an environment where news is in our face and changing 24/7. And the danger is that that news influences us to change what we would have normally done. This is something I wrote about recently. I said, will AI make you a better trader? Or I said, AI won't make you a better trader. The reason why is because AI can create the greatest system in the world, and you can test it 8 ways to Sunday. The problem is the human factor. The problem is second guessing the system. The problem is changing the system right when it's about to work. If you look at what we're talking about here, technical analysis, that's a system, that's a methodology. This setup here is technically sound. The problem is we get influenced by outside information and we second guess it. Okay, so now I want to go back through this segment from the 25th basically till the decision on the 8th. And I want to do it contemporaneously. And that means we're not looking back with what we know now and giving our opinion. I'm looking at this and referencing things that were said and done and the action we saw in real time as it was happening. So I am going to look at this from a technical standpoint. I am going to look at it from what I said at the time. And I'm also going to add in the news flow. And why am I adding in the news flow? Since I'm a technical guy and I say technicals are all that matters. What I've said a million times is the best case scenario, the scenario I love, is when technicals and story or narrative align. That is super powerful. It's when the technicals and the story diverge. If you follow the story and you ignore the technicals, you do it at your own peril. Just for reference, I'm going to be pulling from transcripts of the daily updates. And when I'm referencing events, I'm going to be referencing them from Reuters. Okay. So if we start here, the 25th through the 30th, we basically had 0 stocks on the watch list, nothing on the daily setups, nothing on the active list. We were in a full risk off mode during that point. Then on Tuesday, the 31st, we started hearing stories about de-escalation.